we have such a treat for you today. We're going to dive into some crazy, well, not crazy to me and not crazy to my guest, but bioresonance, energetics, quantum physics, a story of a traditional vet who went holistic. And her story of how she got there is amazing. And I think you're going to find as we go down into this rabbit hole of her story that I think you're really going to enjoy this I think it's going to be a very special podcast. So with that, Dr. Kristi Wilson from Colorado, welcome.
Hi, Rob. Thank you so much for having me.
Gosh, thank you. So I would love to start this show by hearing a little bit your Texas A&M, traditionally educated doctor of veterinary medicine, and you were for a while, and then you moved into holistic. So just tell us, give us that quick bit of how that all happened.
Sure. I graduated from veterinary school in 2002, and I practiced for 3 years in Dallas, Texas, before moving to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. And we moved for my husband. My husband went to school there, so nothing to do with myself. But we ended up. I was a conventional veterinarian. I worked in a typical practice. It was a satellite clinic that I had opened for another vet, and I knew all the clients really well, very personally. I worked really hard. I started having children in 2007. I had 3 kids, and as my children were born, each of them was having kind of chronic inflammatory and autoimmune related issues and gastrointestinal. And my husband also was having chronic recurrent pericarditis, which is the inflammation around your heart. And we had this young family, and we were just really wondering, like, why in the world is our young family so sick? Like, when we were kids, we didn't have all these health problems. No. And my kids were young, and we were going to Walgreens all the time to pick up their prescriptions. Oh. My husband never felt very good. Like, we all just were wondering, like, what in the heck is going on? Because we used to not have to worry about this kind of stuff when we were kids. And so as my, anyone who's been a parent knows, like, you may not have motivation to change things for yourself, but when your kids are sick, you will definitely have motivation to change something. Yes. And the other thing is that as a veterinarian, I was also having kind of the same alarm going off at the same time when my family's so sick, but also my patients are so sick. Yeah. And my patients are coming in and they're basically picking up this bag of medication every month that's costing them $100 to $200 or even more sometimes. And their pets are like chronically dependent on these meds that they have to take for their whole life. And sometimes they're starting as puppies. Yeah. And so you're just playing like this juggling game of what you're going to pick up from the pharmacy for both your human self and for your pets. And there was a great awakening that my husband and I had. And it was around the advent of the smartphone, actually. I can remember when we took a road trip around 2010. And we had just gotten our smartphones, and we were exploring this World Wide Web on our phones. And my husband and I, we found actually a podcast by Natasha Campbell McBride, is a human MD who had done a lot of research regarding autism and gut health and allergies. And we listened to her podcast, and that was the first time that we had ever had any kind of rational explanation for what was happening to our family. Like, how in the world could this be? And then once we discovered that, then we just went down this rabbit hole of like, wow, this is not something that we knew from school. I was trained in veterinary medicine, so I had a lot of medical knowledge that I could sort of tie in and extrapolate what I was reading. And then I'm thankful enough to be married to a landscape architect who understands ecology very well. And so my husband and I were sort of a fierce team because he knew about ecosystems and like what causes plants to die. And I knew about the health part from my medical degree. And so the two of us in synergy, we just realized that we just knew there was so much more that we didn't know. And so we just started, we went full overboard just trying to help our family. And the good news is that we did. Our children had pretty significant problems, and they now today they take no medication. They're all teenagers now. They take no medications. They're, very well socially adjusted. They're physically fit. They eat well. They're mentally very, mentally strong. And all of that is related. It's all mind and body. And so my children were sick kind of starting around 2011. And that's when I really started to evolve my practice, dragging my patients along with my family's health journey. And then in 2018, I was the grand finale. I was diagnosed with stage 3C breast cancer. And so that really set me back. But this has just been more information. I think I always say God gave me this journey of like all these horrible things because I would not be here reaping the rewards that I am today if I hadn't been through so much suffering. And it's amazing to be on the other side of that and say, here I am, I'm healthy. My children are healthy. My husband's healthy. Our family cat, who was also sick at the same time we were, she's 15 and a half now, and she's living her best life. So anyway, we're doing good over here. And this is how we got. And the more we learn, the more holistic we get. And I do think like the person I was back in 2002 would not get along with the person I am in 2024. But we just, it's open minds like a parachute, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Hey there, this is Rob Ryan. I just want to say how much we enjoy making this content for you here. And if you are enjoying it, would you like our video down below? And would you subscribe to our YouTube channel? It sure does help us get discovered by more people like you who need information like this. And also down below in our description, the top link is to our trial pack. We hope you'll order one for your dog so your dog can have fermented superfoods that give them nutrition like they can't find anywhere else. Hard to get nutrients that are easily absorbed. Thank you very much. Now back to the show. It's really nice to hear that. I mean, to have the, I believe that sometimes we don't ask for the journey or want the journey, but on the other end, it can be really amazing what happens. And it sounds like you guys have come through this much better. And I'm glad to hear that, especially with your, very late stage diagnosis. Do you feel like you're completely out of the clear and you're even healthier than you ever were?
On many respects, I feel like I'm healthier than I ever was. Definitely cancer is a long time coming in dogs and in people. It isn't like it just switches on overnight. There's a lot of inflammation for years preceding your diagnosis with cancer. And and that's the beauty of holistic medicine, is that we can catch those imbalances before they become cancer. And we never know how much good we do because we never know who didn't get cancer because of our care. But I still, as a cancer survivor, I still have stem cells in my body that other people don't have. And so I definitely still live a life where I have a lot of things that I do that other people might think were pretty extreme. But for me to be alive here and doing as well as I am, I have to sort of maintain a baseline of that.
Sure. I understand. Well, I'm still glad to hear that that's the bottom line, that you guys are all doing better. I also thought the part about your husband's ecology background and his level of awareness around that, and then added with yours, that's a very interesting take on how you came to where you are today. It's very interesting. I think those stories are amazing.
I think there's a lot of families when their children are sick that it doesn't go as well as it did for our family, because this stuff is really stressful. And talk about, like, this was the most stress I've ever been in my life. And it could really be a segue that's not for the better for a relationship. And I do feel like that's where my husband and I really had great strength, was that we totally saw eye to eye, and we were a force field that could not be disrupted. I mean, we were on a mission to save our family, and with God's help, we did.
Yeah, that's great. So when you were in conventional practice, you brought up a story briefly to me about you caring for some dogs that were being fed raw. And tell me that story, because I got to bring that story out. It's so great.
So as a new veterinarian in Dallas, Texas, when I had just graduated from school, I did not have a lot of holistic knowledge at all. I was just I was pretty open-minded to it, but I didn't have any good tools to help. And I was still very white paper science driven, so when I was a new vet, we worked with a Leonberger rescue in Dallas, and they had a terrible time finding a vet to work with them because they liked to feed their dogs the barf diet, which was bones and raw food. And they would drive to, at that time, which was 20 years ago, they would drive to the Tyson plant or something and like fill their trunk up with chicken wings and necks. And so they were pioneers in that area, and they loved to come to me because I didn't try to change their mind about what they were feeding. I was like, you do you take you do what you think is best for your dogs, and I'll do me. And I still recommended for another 10 years. I was still recommending a lot of commercial kibbles. But I did notice that those dogs were different. I mean, they would rescue them from puppy mills, and they would put them on the Sparf diet. And Leonbergers can have a lot of issues. I mean, they have this big, thick coat and lots of skin, and they can definitely get ear infections, skin problems, all kinds of issues in Dallas, humidity and heat. And those dogs seem to be kind of resistant to that. And so that was my first exposure. And then again, it took me like another 10 years to really come around on that. But I was always open-minded and accepting of what they were doing.
Interesting. Would it be fair to say that even with that amazing degree from that amazing university, that you didn't have very much in the way of nutrition education?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We had very little in nutrition. And the thing about nutrition is that there's nutrient-based nutrition, and there's ingredient-based nutrition. And you can crunch the numbers, and you can say all the metrics and this has this much calcium, this much phosphorus, blah, 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 blah. But do we eat like that? Like, do we get out a calculator and try to figure out like what exactly every single day? I mean, we definitely don't, because the majority of babies eat puffs of corn for every meal. So we're raising baby humans eating this cereal. And so it shouldn't be so complicated for us to raise dogs. I mean, they've evolved alongside of our tables for the entire time we've domesticated them. And so as we're cooking dinner, we're throwing scraps down. And the interesting thing is that there's so much shame around pet food. And I think it's probably one of the biggest marketing successes for all time is that you should not feed your dog table food. So people come in, they're like, oh, I feed them table scraps sometimes. I'm like, great, that's wonderful. And so, I mean, why not? And should the dog's food look the same every single day? Does our food look the same every single day? I mean, does a wolf eat the same thing every single day? So a diverse diet creates a diverse gut, and really all health starts in the gut.
Yes. And that was very beautifully said. And Dr. Billinghurst would applaud you if he was on. He says he's been doing this same message. He stays up on all the science, and nothing has changed for over 30 years. It is all about balance over time, or I like to say perfection over time, because pet consumers believe there is a perfect balance of nutrients. And the way that you phrased that could not have been better. There's ingredients and then there's nutrients. And so all of these so-called nutritionists out there that are feeding by spreadsheet or by strict recipes or calculators, formulators, computer programs. No one eats like that. And it just cracks me up. Like, how does nobody see this? Like, it is in our lives every day. Nobody eats that way. People eat in, like, if you look at the really extreme athletes, they eat in macros and micros, but they don't eat by spreadsheet. They just think about their macros because they're such intense athletes. And I would posit that might not be the most ideal thing for them. But having 4 square meals that are perfectly balanced every day, I think actually harms people and pets because it's not evolutionary and it's not the way that our bodies understand how to be healthy. We need some stressors. We need, the autophagy. We need, periods of rest. All of this stuff is part of it's part of being a living being.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm sure you're aware of intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
And it promotes autophagy. And if we're always, digestion and reproduction are the top 2 metabolic processes of our body. They take more resources than anything else. So
Yes.
If we're always digesting our food, then our cells are not having a chance to clean up cancer cells.
Yes.
Stop autoimmunity. We can't do anything except digesting. So like the all day buffet of kibble is like the worst thing ever. And maybe even those dogs that are eating kibble, if they just ate kibble for less hours of the day, that would probably even be a benefit. So, but the problem is they can't because the kibble has such a glycemic spike that they feel hungry all the time. It's like eating rolls all day. And so they're just like, but truly, I try to get my pet parents to intermittent fast their pets. I try to have them eat in the morning between 7 and 9 a.m. and then eat between 2 and 4 p.m. and then nothing after 4 p.m. or before their breakfast. So they get a good overnight fast. And even my own dogs only eat once a day. And then I give them like a little chewy in the afternoon, some kind of, freeze-dried roadkill or something. But, so I think that is a great intermittent fasting our pets is really beneficial and it's actually free and sometimes saves you some money. So.
Yeah, of course. I mean, and I've been pretty open about the fact that once a week, my dog doesn't eat the whole day. Mm-hmm. So he effectively gets, more than 24 hours because he eats once a day, usually in the morning, has the rest of the day, then a full day, then the morning comes. So we have, multiple hours, but he always intermittent fasts because just by feeding once a day, it's very funny. When I heard what you just said 25 years ago, that the body uses up a tremendous amount of energy and it needs time to clean up misfolded proteins and toxins and, regenerate organs. Like that was all you needed to tell me. I was like, I'm in. And so any guilt that you have, especially I have labs, like labs are the biggest food pigs that there are in the dog world. I mean, they just love food. So they look at you like, did you forget something? Like I'm supposed to be eating at this time, like they're tapping their watch, And I busy myself, I busy them. I try to change up a routine on their fasting day, but it never ceases to amaze me how you can logically tell people what that does, why it's important. I mean, it literally could be the difference between life and death. It could be, depending on their genetics, and help them live longer. Because you always have people that say, I'll do whatever it takes to get my dog to live longer. And then you'll tell them about fasting, they'll say, accept that. So, it's just funny. I'm with you there. And I really appreciate you phrasing it that way. So, I want to get a little bit into this, we won't go too deep because we don't have enough time, but I'm really fascinated by energetics, energy. Let's start with PEMF and let's just talk a tiny bit about what interests you in like quantum physics. So let's go quantum physics.
So basically when our bodies and our pets' bodies, they're really made to heal. I mean, we are created with everything in us to be able to heal. And we are always trying to find homeostasis, which is where our cells are happy and good and they're in a healthy place. Now, nobody stays in a point of homeostasis. Everybody kind of vacillates in and out of homeostasis. And then there's sometimes where people are so far from homeostasis that it's been a while since they've seen homeostasis, but it is impossible to stay there. And so when we're thinking about how our cells evolved since the beginning of time, is that we are really part of nature. We are the Earth's gravitational pull has a very big influence on our cells and our level of inflammation. And that's even noticed in the astronauts when they try to go up and live on the moon. They come back with like broken bones and all kinds of problems, digestive and you name it. And so when we're trying to find health, the closer we get to the Earth, that's how we find it, is the Earth's magnetic field, the sun's infrared rays, the oxygen that we're breathing, the dirt on the ground, that has microbes, and the plants that have the phytonutrients and nourish our cells and detoxify us in that way. And then the species appropriate diets for our pets, where they're eating prey animals and eating the stomach contents of the prey, which you can emulate through fermented greens. So we're basically like, if we want to find health, if you want to just dumb it down and be like, how can I get my pet healthy? How can I get healthy? Look to the earth, look to what's around you, eat things that are grown from the ground, that are, that are sustainable and and make sense for our ecosystem. And so we can actually, one of the modalities that I use, I have multiple lasers in my practice. I have a high intensity PEMF unit. I also have ozone. I use a lot of Chinese herbs and acupuncture.
Amazing.
PEMF specifically stands for pulsed electromagnetic field therapy. And basically what it is it's a magnetic machine that emulates natural forces of magnets that we can get from the earth. And we can actually use that to biohack our cells and our pets to help correct diseased cells, to increase circulation, to decrease pain, to decrease inflammation, to promote wound healing, to downgrade our sympathetic nervous system, to cut some heat, get rid of allergies, to rehab our gut. I mean, the amount of things that, not pulsed electromagnetic field therapy is not a magic miracle healer. What it is it is a body optimizer. So It helps your body to heal itself. And so when we use and tap into all of these modalities that are basically, the technology is taken from things that are provided naturally in the earth, just at a higher amount, we can actually make a huge difference in our bodies.
That's really well said. So it's like opening doors that allow the healing to happen, as opposed to just closing them.
Right.
Yeah. It's also interesting. I loved how you said, we're basically, a lot of the cool things we do and we see in holistic medicine and nutrition, we're mimicking nature in an ideal situation. If you look at regenerative ranching, what I believe is the absolute diamond standard of the raising animals for our food, the healthiest animals on the planet and the best for the soil. You're really just trying to mimic, by moving cattle, moving different animals that are pooping in areas, stomping it in the ground, creating really great soil health. All you're doing is trying to mimic what was happening naturally for, millions of years. And so it always occurs to me, like, I hear the same message over and over again. When I see patterns, I have to call them out, because, using a pad for, maybe as a shortcut to getting, being out in nature more, let's say, right?
Yeah. I mean, regenerative farming is the only sustainable farming. I mean, there is not another way that is sustainable. We need to have the animals pooping on the ground where the plants are grown, because that's nature's fertilizer. And weeds are invasive, and they invade ground that's depleted of nutrients. So we don't have to use so much weed killer if we just rehab our soil We try to do that for our own yard and our grass. I mean, we use chicken poop on the grass. We don't use any fertilizer.
Nice.
We use just natural things. You can use Epsom salt on your plants. It's just, if you look to nature, there's so much there and it's really the only sustainable way for us to keep this earth the way it should be for future generations.
Yeah, that's great. All right, so by the way, I have a PEMF pad, but I don't honestly know if I don't think it's high. It's got 2 settings. It's got a box. But what's a high? Why a high? What did you call it? A high energy?
High intensity. So there's low intensity PEMF and there's high intensity PEMF. And if you don't know what it is, my guess is that you have a low intensity PEMF. The low intensity PEMF is not a bad modality. It's great. It just requires, it's the low and slow method. So if you use that, Matt, like once a week or once every 2 weeks, you're probably not getting a whole lot of bang for your buck. But if you use it every day consistently, have a regular practice of doing it twice a day, then you can make a huge difference in your inflammation and all kinds of chronic diseases. When you use high intensity PEMF, it's much more, it is what the word, it's high intensity. So it's going to be, maybe you have to do 1 session a week for 15 minutes as opposed to every day, twice a day. So, and also you do notice, it's definitely like some people and some animals prefer the low and slow method, and some people and some animals prefer the higher method. I do find that people more often have detoxification reactions where they don't feel good after they use too much of something.
I can see that.
And that can happen in animals as well, but they don't have that as often. It's called a Herxheimer reaction in humans, but I don't see a ton of Herxheimer reactions in animals. They tend to not have as many issues with detoxifying as we do as humans, but they still can have a little bit of that. Too much, too fast is a good for anybody. But
yeah, the other thing that just popped into my head about us mimicking nature and using things like a PEMF pad, high intensity or low intensity, is we have all these things that bombard us in our lives and our animals' lives, like our neighbors' Wi-Fi signals. Even if we don't have that in our home, our neighbors' use of chemicals, even though we don't use chemicals in our yard, or there's pesticide and herbicide drift in the air. There's all sorts of things that we really have very little control over, so we have to take control over it in another way. Do you have any thoughts about that topic?
For sure, yeah. I mean, so there are definitely 2 ways to approach things to try to control what's out there. I mean, you can either try to keep all the badness away and put foil on your windows, or you can try to, recover yourself from being exposed to the badness. I mean, we really have quite a toxic environment, and there's a healthy level of focusing on that, because if we focus on that so much that we're afraid to live, then that fear may be more destructive to our bodies than that's also very harmful to us. So we want to try to manage it. And I will say that all of these biohacking tools really help me to have more peace with what's out there environmentally, because I know that I'm optimizing my body to do its best work. And I know that I'm optimizing my pets' bodies and my patients' bodies to do their best work. And, we can't live in fear, and we do have to do our part to change that and to make a ripple effect so that we can change the world altogether. But it's a balance for sure.
No, that's great. I just feel like you can play good defense and a little bit of offense, and a combination of both is a good thing. Yes. But it really all starts with diet. If you don't get the diet right, forget it. It just doesn't matter what else you've got going on. That's
yeah. I mean, I have holistic client, I've got a holistic practice. And so when people come, if they're not willing to change the food, I'm just hitting my head against a wall. And it's kind of hard because people, they're financially concerned about paying for the food, but The problem is that if you like things like a colonic torsion can cost you $10,000. And I had never seen a colonic torsion until recently. And that's a gut microbiome problem. So your gut is fermenting all these carbohydrates and blowing up your colon like a balloon and then it's flipping on itself. Or this is your dog, not you. But so, for $10,000, you could feed that dog raw food for 2 lifetimes. So, I mean, that's where you have to consider the risk versus benefit is, are we going to treat when we're treating from an Eastern or if we're treating from a conventional realm, we're treating from the top down, we're treating animals from the disease perspective. If we want to try to prevent disease, we have to treat from the roots up.
Yep. Well, we always say, like, obviously our company, Gussie's Gut, we have this great, supplement, but we say, look, if you're going to spend money, do not spend your first dollar in nutrition on our supplement. Get the diet right with a good appropriate diet, biologically appropriate diet for your pet, and come to us after you get that right. Because you're never going to, sometimes we get people who want to, put our product on a kibble, and we just say like that, you're welcome to do it. It doesn't work. It just does not work. The way we shine is you've got to have the baseline of a healthy animal, and then we can help take that to a much higher level and plane. So it's very challenging. So I know from talking to you before, you've got a thriving practice. You've got a nice balance in your life. I just want to take this moment for you to talk to new vets, young vets, aspiring veterinarians with what I get to talk to vets like you all the time that are more holistic, functional, have multiple modalities that they work with, whatever title we want to give them, natural. They're busier than they can handle. They have a waiting list. They have to turn people away. We see this all the time. Whereas you think of conventional practices as being successful, but most people know that they're usually not quite, they're overworked, they're overstressed, and they're not getting these health outcomes that they're not getting a job satisfaction that a holistic vet gets by truly remedying an animal. So can you just tell us about how you practice and a little bit about why you practice that way?
Yeah. So actually, the interesting thing about me is my practice is out of my house, which is very unconventional. But I had just come off of my own diagnosis with advanced breast cancer, and I didn't want to take out a bunch of loans and burden myself with a lot of overhead. And never in my life did I realize that I would ever have people coming to my home for me to see their animals. And it was a colleague of mine was already doing it. And she's the one who was like, hey, look, you can do this. I mean, what I would say is that, the conventional realm of veterinary practice is something that is useful, especially for young vets, to get their feet wet, to know what is out there, to see it from that perspective. Like, I do think that my time as a conventional vet was very useful to me, and it made me who I am today. And so I'm really thankful for that journey that I had. I will say that it is not gratifying to put every pet that has an itch on an immunosuppressive drug or to dispense antibiotics over and over again for recurrent urinary tract infections, for GI problems, to have to do all these things where you're just hitting your head against a wall. It's fine. Like, you can do it for a short time, but in the long run, it does not bring you true joy. I mean, at least it did not bring me to true joy. It may bring others, but I feel like for young vets, the main thing to keep on your radar is that you don't have to do things the way that we've all been told to do them. You don't have to go to work for someone else, for a corporation, to check these boxes for every patient, to follow these algorithms. You can venture outside of the box. And in many cases, the demand is so huge for that realm of practice. So if you're feeling, our profession is plagued with suicide, and it's a hard job. I mean, the majority of our work as conventional practitioners is working in a room with no windows. I mean, I worked in a warehouse for 12 years and we didn't even know if it was sunny or rainy or what outside because we never saw the light of day for 12 years. And that's hard on a vet physically and mentally. I mean, all of it is just very hard. You're on your feet, you're dealing with sick patients, and you don't feel super hopeful about what you're doing because you know they're going to be back for a refill of the antibiotic in 3 weeks. And then they're going to deal with MRSA or some kind of resistant bacteria. And so, so you can break outside of the box. It is not always easy. It's definitely the road less traveled, but the demand for this is just getting more and more. This is what people want. They seek you out. They come. I mean, really, I practice out of my house. I feel like I could practice in a trash dump and I would still have people coming to find me because they want someone who really cares about uncovering the root cause of what's going on with their pet. And it's the long road to health. Like not every client is meant to be a client in a holistic practice. You know, people who only have 10 minutes for the dog and they need an in and out answer and they just want this done yesterday. That's not necessarily the best client for holistic practice. But the clients that a holistic practice attracts that are truly the right clients are the ones that this pet is their family member. This pet is so important to them that sometimes, unfortunately, they prioritize the pet over their own health. These people will spend hours and hours with you trying to get their pet to a state of health so that they can enjoy life together for as long as possible and keep their pet youthful and vibrant and running and chasing balls and not having to have surgery on their knees or take a anti-inflammatory every day because they can hardly move. We in the holistic world, we're in the business of making these animals perform in mind, body, and spirit. We want these dogs to look amazing in every way and to be amazing and to contribute to the family in a positive way instead of taking valuable resources of time and money dealing with their illnesses.
Yeah. Because you said mobility and comfort and all of that, it made me think of my Labradors. I've had 3 Labradors as an adult on my own. And my first 2, I had them, I got it in my head. The word is fixed, but I always try to get away from that term. But they've all been males. And so they've been, what's the term? I'm losing the term. That's
neutered.
Not, thank you. Neutered.
Right. Yeah.
So I had the first 2 neutered, and I see a very huge difference at my third dog, Gus. He's now 7. Mm-hmm. And I've never seen, first of all, he's not neutered at all. He's never been altered in any way that way. And so he has the flexibility of a puppy. I talk about this all the time. His wrists bend all the way, touch his forearms, just like the puppies do. The flexibility, the athleticism is insane. The way he plays and twists, you can tell in his spinal. His spinal column is super flexible. My other 2 dogs were very healthy, all fed raw their whole life and very holistic. And that alone, I think, caused them to, like around 7 to 10, you could see they would start to slow down in their athleticism. Mm-hmm. And they were becoming more stiff. When they get up, they'd be like, Mm-hmm. And we know now that lack of testosterone in males anyway is a key cause of like these cruciate ligament, these tears, these cartilage, and all these connective tissues get more brittle. Mm-hmm. And I know that you're very aware of all this stuff with hormones. Can you talk to us about, first of all, can you just tell me if I'm onto something there with dogs that are fixed compared to not fixed, or, altered or not, well, and then hormones? Yes.
So yes, and yes. So I can tell you this from a personal perspective because when I was 41 years old, I was put in menopause, chemically induced menopause. And because of my breast cancer. And I was in menopause for 4 years. And I eventually started to completely unravel because my hormones across the board, estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone were zero. And I was not getting my breast cancer, but I was having all kinds of other problems. So I ended up at the point where maybe you're not going to die of breast cancer, but you're going to have dementia when you're 50, or you're going to have like osteoporosis. And there were many big problems that are just as bad as breast cancer. So that was when I set out to understand my hormones and how can I have these healthy hormones so that I don't get breast cancer, but I also optimize my brain and my bones and my heart and all these things that hormones depend on. Or organs that the hormones feed. So I, in my practice, basically everything that I talk about with my patients, I've been there. I know how it feels. I know how it feels to be menopausal when you're still young, and it ages you on a freight train. And when we take these puppies and we spay and neuter, I mean, sometimes they're spaying and neutering puppies at 8 weeks old. And when they're spayed and neutered at 8 weeks old, it's the equivalent of taking the reproductive organs out of a 2-year-old child. So do you think that 2-year-old child would develop properly if they did not have testes or ovaries? I mean, they wouldn't. And so I don't know how we can get away with thinking that these 8-week-old puppies and kittens are going to be developing normally. And they don't. I mean, unfortunately, they get all kinds of, the biggest thing is the thyroid problems with the low hormones. We end up seeing tons of thyroid issues very early. And so, and then the musculoskeletal decline is absolutely significant. And so actually one of I love rescues. So I definitely don't want to be a proponent of everybody having a bunch of unspayed and neutered dogs, because we have to be conscious about not filling up our shelters with puppies. And so, but I always noticed that some of the healthiest rescues were the ones that had a litter, like the dog was adopted in the rescue because it had puppies with it. And those dogs were much healthier than the ones that are spayed and neutered when they're 8 weeks old. And so we have to figure out how to hack the situation, because we can't have all this animal overpopulation. I mean, I've worked in shelters and I've had to hold I've had to actually inject these dogs with euthanasia solution. I mean, they're healthy dogs and they didn't deserve to die. And so we all need to be kind of in both camps of, yes, we want to optimize our dog, and yes, we want to also prevent overpopulations. But I do believe that there's an in between there. And so the behavior problems in males are the biggest reason to neuter, because males will travel, they'll leave your house and run away, and that's not good. Or they can become aggressive with an imbalance of testosterone, which holistically you probably could use some Chinese herbs and correct that, but you can have issues behaviorally and environmentally with an intact male dog. You can get your dog, you can have a vasectomy done where they still have their testes, but they're vasectomized. That doesn't solve the behavior issues. So there are some dogs that I still recommend neutering, because I'd rather neuter them than have them in a shelter because they bit someone. And so I do keep a close eye on male dogs and their behavior and make that decision with the owner. I mean, with many things in holistic medicine, it's not a black and white answer. It's not like a concrete yes or no. It's like, let's make this a tailored approach. This pet is a snowflake, and let's make this pet's life the best it can be with what we have available. And then for females, as soon as you spay and neuter them, they're in menopause. And you can ask any woman who's been in menopause how it feels. And you're definitely not your most vital self, and speaking from my experience, I have been I was in menopause. Now I'm out of menopause. So it's like I've experienced all kinds of things across the board with hormones. But when these dogs are spayed and neutered, they go into menopause for the rest of their life, and they age on a freight train. And the females with female dogs, you can do an ovary sparing surgery where you leave one ovary. And that, I think, is kind of the best of both worlds, because then the dog only comes into heat once a year instead of twice a year. usually,
Yeah.
if everything goes correctly. And then also you take out the uterus, so they don't have a chance of getting, if it's done correctly, they don't have a chance of getting a uterine infection, and they still have a little bit of hormones. So they're not totally menopausal, but it still gives them that vitality of youth. And so there are options. You just have to be creative. And again, thinking outside of the box. An open mind is like a parachute. Like, we can help these animals without an all or nothing approach. And the current recommendations for spaying and neutering are just all or nothing. And it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah, of course. And it's funny how, you can go to a vet who thinks, they're probably from the same university, but this vet thinks that 8 weeks is acceptable to neuter or spay. And the other vet says 6 months. The other vet says a year. They're all from the same university. It just cracks me up that there's, like, people don't understand, like, so you're getting one opinion. Like, there are lots of theories out there. My vet, I had a nice long conversation when I was in anticipation of getting Gus 7 years ago. And I said, what about the, anger and, any acting out? He said, I've never seen it. I've just never seen it. I don't think it's a problem. And if it is, you snip the testicles off and away you go. We're done with it. And I said, what about cancer? He said, same thing. We just if they get testicular cancer, we take them off. It's not a death sentence. So I said, okay, well, and obviously my dog's eating great and exercising. So he has a very low risk of having some health issues, hopefully. And so you have to take these things as I just find that, we did such a good job of campaigning irresponsible dog owners to spay and neuter so that we don't have an overpopulation. It never worked. I mean, you can say, well, it did work because we might have double the amount of shelters or but we still have full shelters. And the folks that I run into, like our customers, they're responsible folks. They know exactly where their dogs are. Their dogs are trained, all of this good stuff. So it's so important what you said. Every dog is unique. Every home situation, lifestyle is unique. I could definitely see certain breeds that are very independent, a little on the, we'll say, high energy side.
Yeah.
I won't use the word aggressive, but that have like their raging hormones are going to add to that. It might be hard for somebody who, is a smaller person and can't control that dog on a leash or something. I can see there being some cases where that would be appropriate, but hormones are people still don't understand. The hormones are the fountain of youth. They're the zest of life of all people and animals. And I mean, it affects everything, our brain, our cognition, our skin.
Totally.
Everything. Yeah.
And healthy hormones are protective against cancer. And, dogs have a very high risk of breast cancer. They have 8 breasts and they're located on their ventrum. So basically they're just a watershed for all the lymphatic toxins. And dogs have a high risk of breast cancer. And that was one of the marketing, reasons that people said, oh, you need to spay your dog so they don't get breast cancer. But that sort of approach is really throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because you're basically like, okay, why don't you keep feeding them this toxic stuff and putting them in this dirty fish tank, and then they're going to get breast cancer. But if they're fed a species appropriate diet and they have a low inflammatory life and you don't put fertilizer in your yard, like, you can lower their, healthy hormones are breast protective. So healthy hormones are what we all want, right? For myself, for my patients, like we want healthy hormones that can work for us and to use our body the way it's intended to be with hormones.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So well said. Well, I know you're doing, on that note, for the folks that have animals that are listening to this that have been spayed and neutered, talk to me about what you're doing in the supplementation world of hormones. Like, I think we should touch upon that for the folks that have already had, animals that are, yeah.
Yeah, so I actually took a course. There's a course by Dogosterone, and it's testosterone replacement therapy for male and female dogs that have been spayed and neutered. And it can really help. I mean, the main indications for it are for dogs that are weak in the rear legs and can't get up. And I see that on a regular basis. Big dog can't come in. They have a handle on it. They used to pick it up. They have ramps that they help to go up the stairs. Testosterone really affects the pelvic limbs, which are the back legs. And wow. It really escalates osteoarthritis and degeneration in the lumbar spine, the hips, the back legs. So if we, and also the kidneys as well can be influenced by testosterone, and kidney disease can be escalated by low testosterone as well. And so that's the main indication for dogs to give testosterone replacement therapy, although it probably helps with a lot of things. Just like you were saying, hormones affect everything, but the testosterone specifically helps with that pelvic limb degeneration.
Wow, that's really cool. I mean, there's so many people I meet that, they could have another year or 2 or 3 with their dog, but they feel so bad that it's not mobile, and their legs are giving out, and they let go sooner when they could be maybe looking at something like that therapy that maybe it buys them another year or 2 of good quality life. Plus I wish I would have known about, I don't know if it's been a while since my first dog. He had a congenital issue, and so I used to call him a land shark. So if he stopped walking, he would start to sink. And I did everything for that dog, like laser weekly, acupuncture weekly, chiro weekly, and hyperbaric oxygen. And it was great. It gave him a really nice, good quality of life, and he lived to 16, a big black lab. But I would have thrown in some dogsterone. You say dogosterone, I'll put up on the screen here, DOGO, like doggo, and then sterone.com if you want to research it yourself. Yeah, and get a great vet like Dr. Kristi to administer it. But it's like you've got men that are like in their 50s, 60s, 70s that are on, what is that called in the human world, where men are getting their testosterone injections and stuff?
Yeah, like testosterone pellets and things. I mean, and if you ask people that have that therapy, I mean, sometimes it can be really life-changing for them. I mean, it is, I will say that I have done many euthanasias in my time of practice, and the hard euthanasias are the ones where the dog is fully there, fully happy, and they